All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Dominique O'Neill. I'm a programmer at SF DocFest, and I'm so excited that you all are joining us for the Q&A of copyright infringement. And I'm sitting here with the director, David Shabshan, and producer, Frank Spadafora. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. We're super excited to be with the festival this year.
Yeah, so I have a couple questions. First of all, tell us how you met CJ.
So I'll start. I was introduced to CJ by a good friend of mine during her monochrome exhibition, where she took over a Brooklyn warehouse and she built out a kind of like a custom house with huge Legos. And each room was its own solid color. And she hung her artwork in this gallery that was like walking through a color-coded house. And so I was so struck by her artwork and her talent that I quickly kind of, did all the following on social media and whatnot, became a huge fan of hers. And then it was shortly thereafter, just about 2 months, that she did the first copyright infringement 1.0. And as you see in the film, we explain how copyright came about, but and I was able to participate. And so she had dropped a box like 4 blocks from where I live in the city, and I was in the middle of a meeting, and I got up and I ran out, and I ran so hard, and I did not get that box, but I had such fun, so much fun doing it, and immediately connected with other people online who were running as well that year, and so just became really dedicated through that experience. And then by the time it got to the second, third year, I had DM'd her and I said, hey, listen, I'm a commercial producer, but I have a pitch for you to do a documentary about this. I'm really interested in the theory of copyright, the law of copyright, and how it's affecting artists. And I want to base it around you. And she was like, let's go for it. And that's kind of how the movie came about.
Amazing. David, what about you? When did you get brought on board?
So I think Frank had already had some conversations with CJ, and she had, agreed to kind of go on this journey. Frank and I have known each other for a long time. We've worked together on lots of stuff. And yeah, I don't know. I was grocery shopping. Frank called me and said, there's this cool artist. You want to do a documentary? And I said, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And then I met CJ at her studio a couple times, before we properly went into production, and, the vibes were right. We clicked, and she seemed okay with letting me invade her space for a little while. And yeah, it was great.
Great. Before we start talking about the hunt, tell me a little bit about the style of the film, because it's very graphic. It's very fun to watch, even aside from the adrenaline of watching people run for these. Can you talk a little bit about the music choices and your editing choices as well?
Yeah, I think from the get-go, one of my first conversations with Frank was that I saw this as not even though CJ is an artist and it's about her art practice, I didn't see this as an art documentary, but I really saw it as a lot of our references were music documentaries, tour documentaries. And so, CJ has this really big personality. She has built this community of fans and people who are really engaged. And there is sort of this high energy adrenaline happening. And it felt really important for the movie to capture that energy and not sort of be a self-serious exploration on her practice, because that's not even really her personality and how she approaches stuff. And so, and a lot of that credit too, in terms of how it was executed and the final product, goes to our editor, Will Hart. Will and I had worked together a lot and done a lot of unscripted work together. But he also had a real vision on how we could use sort of patchwork and things like that, elements you see in the film, to kind of bring that alive. And then the music too, Will and I worked really closely on that. Right from the get-go, I sent everyone a playlist of songs that I was listening to while we were shooting and while I was thinking about it. And it felt like I really wanted it to have sort of this punk rock feeling, heavy influence on female vocalists, because it's that's who CJ is. She is a rock star who isn't afraid to break a rule and, to benefit her art and to do the thing. And so it felt like music was another cool place to kind of carry that spirit. through. And I'm glad you said you found it exciting, because I think it's like the one thing I want is like the drop is such a thrill to participate in. And so I wanted, as best we could, is have the movie kind of like create that feeling for people watching it. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I think you saying it like music docs is like influential. It totally has that same energy. Um, what about let's see, it's sort of speculated in the film, but what do you think the draw is for, I mean, and Frank, you probably have a firsthand answer for this, but what do you think the draw is for people to participate in this particular scavenger hunt?
I think that most of CJ's practice is very, and her artwork is very expensive. And
Mhm.
when the incident came about with the cease and desist, she pivoted into giving away these shirts that she had every intention of selling, and that artwork at a decent price for free. And so a lot of people who were already fans of CJ's like saw that opportunity for what it was. And I liken it to like a sneakerhead vibe almost, where it's
Mhm.
like this limited quantity of a really valuable thing. I mean, at the end of the day, for the copyright that we filmed, it was a t-shirt and a hat in the tin in the boxes, and it's just a t-shirt and a hat. And but
Mhm.
yet, like anything else that people collect, it's the value of it is what we assign to it. And that idea is what I found so interesting in the art world. In a previous life before producing, I was working and selling art, and to me, the community of people who bought it and what influenced them to make a purchase at any price point was very intriguing to me. And so she executes it. She picks something really cool each year and she executes it really well. And it's just this like great spirited energy to participate, whether you get the box or not. It's this idea. I thought it was such a great use of social media. You don't see many artists using social media in this way. And so, yeah, it had many, many elements to it that I think when put together, that's why I think it was so important for us in the film to also show the fans' perspective of what their journey was like throughout the day, and not just follow CJ in the execution of the exhibition, but rather some of her fans go as far as trying to create decoys themselves. And it's really kind of created such a fun niche community around this exhibition. And we really wanted to make sure that we highlighted the vast variety of people that get to participate in something around contemporary art that otherwise these people might not walk into a four-wall white gallery.
Mhm.
It really broadens and brings people in. So as an exhibition, that's all those elements are really what spoke to us and why we found it exciting.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about including the experts of the art world in the film, and just sort of putting out that like the pipeline of the MFA to gallery, and how like CJ sort of like defies that? Do you want to talk a little bit about including that point of view in your film?
Totally. I mean, I think Frank and I agreed pretty early on that we wanted that perspective. Like, we had whiteboarded out a lot of plans. Obviously, like when you're filming a documentary, a lot of those plans go out the window because the footage you get is what you're working with, not always like what you plan.
Mhm.
But that was one thing we definitely talked about from the top. But I think even more so, like in the experience of filming it, it became more critical
Mhm.
because like I'm not an art expert. And so me coming into the situation, like I think CJ is undeniable, but I also think that giving the context for what she's doing and what that looks like kind of in the environment of the art world is even more impressive and more interesting, because I think hearing from our experts and understanding like how, especially like the market side of art, not like, this isn't like a conversation about like the quality of art, but it's talking about like the market value of art, how that's decided,
Mhm.
and how we as people who consume art like get access to it and what we get to see or what's put in front of us. And so I think like CJ's ability to break through the noise, for her to exist so outside of that system and have built
Mhm.
such a following to be able to sell a drawing for as much as she can, for having never gone to auction, have never shown it like a gallery, for never showing in a museum, like it felt really important to kind of like place that in the space and understand how like she is an outlier, this isn't ordinary. um and So for me it was like I didn't know that, and so it felt really important. Like, but I found it really interesting, and it definitely like clarified something like about what the movie
Mhm.
could say. And so it felt like I wanted people to be able to come into this like and not have to be. You don't have to have an art history degree to appreciate like this film or what we're trying to say at all. Like, it's definitely like, you know, just trying to like introduce people to like a landscape that, for me, I didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that the same can be said for Nikki, the lawyer who speaks on the film about the law of copyright and how, you know, before shooting this and really diving into the subject matter, yeah, it was like, I mean, honestly, ask me right now what the law of copyright is, and I probably could like give you a very long-winded explanation that's not 100% accurate, because it's such a law that is used to the advantage when it's a like it can be used to people's advantage, but it's also a huge disadvantage in the art
Mhm.
world. And so we knew that we could make a film of just 250 boxes being dropped throughout the world. That would be incredibly boring. And the experts in our film help us to explore these topics and help kind of we tried to pair each city with like a subject or another topic of the film that we wanted to unveil or explore, and our experts definitely helped us achieve that.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about how the places are chosen, and then like where, like if there's any pattern? I mean, I guess you can't give patterns away, but like are there predetermined drop off locations, or is it just like are they driving around the city and they're like, this is a good spot?
So much to a
Mhm.
producer's like worst nightmare, there's no pre-planning that goes into when a copyright has grown over the years. The first one was just New York, and that was just,
Mhm.
again, as explained in the film, like total a happy accident that this is how this was received and went down. Then the next year, I think they introduced Los Angeles, and so Elsa, and how to do a little bit more logistics kind of planning. But and then by the time they got to the third year, they had included Australia. And then 4.0, which we filmed, that was their biggest endeavor, and it kind of was great for us because it gave us that will they won't they kind of attitude of like, can they do this? Like, they've never done it this big. It was 5 days back to back. And as you see in the film, there's multiple groups that are organizing, that are volunteering on CJ's behalf, or that she's
Mhm.
roped in, including her family. And just like the logistics of all of how the shirts and the tins get assembled, that is definitely overseen at the studio level. But then when you're in it, you know, um, it would be nice if everything, like, it's really, this was so funny, right? Is like, we would pass by a place and I had it timed in my mind, like, oh, a box needs to be dropped every 10 minutes or 13 minutes for us to be able to meet the number of boxes and then be able to make the flight to
Mhm.
where we were going. And it would be going on 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And I realized that actually the selection of where the boxes go, like, that is part of the artistic expression of CJ. Like, she absolutely like would pass by places that I was like, just drop a box. And she would be like, it's not right. Like, it's not the vibe. It doesn't look like, it's not, it wasn't right in her mind's eye to take even the photo that then appeared on social media to then show you where the box was. So that was something that I found was so interesting, is like, there's no pre-plan. They maybe go into a
Mhm.
city with a couple of ideas, but it's really a flow, and that was really fun to see unfold. Horrible to produce around, but we figured it out. We had two vehicles units operating at the same time, so one would go ahead to try to an area that we thought they might drop at and try to capture some dropping and some initial reaction, and then we would stay behind. That unit would stay behind to capture whoever picked up the box, while the other unit was riding along with CJ. And that's how most of our cities operated. Some of the other
Mhm.
cities, we had help in London and in Australia, and they operated at a two-car situation as well. And yeah, it was it was a
I just
delight.
remember a lot of phone calls. Like, I was usually in CJ's car, and Frank was in like the second vehicle, and I got a lot of phone calls from Frank being like, "Any idea of like where we're headed or when CJ's going to put a box down?" I'm like, I don't know. It's I have no idea. I'm just in this
Yeah.
car along for the ride.
And the producer wants to like step in, and me wants to like step in and be like, planning or giving suggestions and stuff, but we really didn't want to interfere with what they had going on, and so we
Yeah.
we got what we got.
Yeah. I didn't even think about like every photo that they post is really photogenic. I didn't even like think about the fact that those are even curated just for in that way, like as an artistic place. But yeah, that makes sense how you
Yeah.
explain that. Can you talk about so almost every single team, so like CJ's team, her family, and the London team, like mentions the adrenaline. They all say, like individually at different points, that there's so much adrenaline from this activity. Can you talk about a little bit more about like what your adrenaline levels were like being with them in that
Yeah.
on those
I
drops?
I knew it because I ran, and nobody else on the crew had actually been a part of the exhibition from the fan side before. And it was like, just you wait, guys, like just you wait. And it was like, I would say it like they can, turning off your location on your phone is a real thing. We had tails that
Mm,
would track the license plate. And then we later on after shooting were getting screen grabs from fans that like they had our license plate and they were totally tracking us around. And like people got really intense with it. And she doesn't give any fair warning. The morning of, she tells you what city she's in and you're going, and you have no idea where she's starting in the city. She doesn't give away any of those details. And so that was something that, again, this level of engagement, digital to physical, was like, that's so rare. And I know that everyone
mhm.
throws around the word influencer so frequently, but not a lot of people can disrupt, no matter what type of category of influence you are, a musician, actor, um, can actually get people like up and active the way that this does. And that was so beautiful to me. And then yeah, once you have people chasing you and people, you see them running towards the box. I mean, that one guy, the poor guy and gentleman in Mexico, who thank God ended up staying all along for 5 more hours, ultimately got a box, but he saw the cameras first, celebrated too early, and got scooped. And like, it was like, oh my God, these people are insane. And it was that level of adrenaline that was palpable. And so we tried our best to capture that and really bring you into that experience, because it was intoxicating.
You
Yeah.
get really like wrapped up in it. Like it's exciting. Like you're there and like, yes, like you're being chased and they're putting down boxes, but it's like CJ's whole attitude about it is like, it's this like game of like cat and mouse that's like you feel like you're like a spy. And so like the longer you do it, you just get so deep into it that like you're just like on the edge of your seat for so much of the day. And you're like, all we're doing is like putting boxes down on the street. But it's like you can't really step out even for a second to like realize like it's a scavenger hunt, but like you're just so deep in it that yeah, the adrenaline is really high. And it's just like it's so fun. Like I don't know, it's not often as like adults that we just get to like play a game and like a city-wide game. And so I don't know, it was just like really fun to play this like game of tag across like Mexico City, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's wild. It's so wild in the film to see people like as the box goes down onto the ground, they're there. I mean, it's like you can make that stuff up in movies, but it's right there on the screen. Like
Yeah.
it's just so wild to see that.
Chicago was crazy like that. Like Chicago really did come to play. Elsa says that in the film, and it was no joke. Like half the time, and there were only like 50 boxes, maybe plus like a couple extra hats to throw people to like get off our junk. But like there's only 50 boxes in the van, and so it's like, if you don't get to post that, that makes it almost borderline frustrating, because it's like, where did you come from? How did you know that we were going to be there before it dropped? It was like, crap, like we have to, no, we need to like post 50. That's the rule. Like, that's the goal. So yeah, it was insane.
Yeah. Do you think are there like dark web like community boards where everybody's messaging each other like a
I hope
finders
so.
club?
I hope so. And I hope they watch the movie. No, I think that there's definitely, what's interesting though, is there's definitely a secondary market for the hats and the shirts and stuff.
Oh,
And that
interesting.
is interesting for art too, right? You're like, is this commerce, and how do people, um, we didn't find it very much the year that we recorded, but there was talk of like some years where people would hoard and try to get like 6 boxes in a day, and then they
Mm,
would keep one and try to eBay the rest or something. And like, yeah, that like sucks. Like that's like you're like, be one and be like grateful for the experience is like kind of my approach to it, at least. But well, luckily we didn't really find that many people who were doing that our year. But you do see that some of the items are available online on these secondary websites, and it's like, yeah, that's the prerogative, I understand. But true like fans of CJs and collectors, like, no, they're coveted pieces. You couldn't offer me a price.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. And the question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind is you give a bit of a hint at the end of the film that copyright infringement can happen maybe again. Do you have any insider information you can share?
David?
No. No, we don't have any inside information.
No, we don't. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about CJ is like, you know, her mind is, she's a creative. She's a true authentic artist, and her mind is already, I'm sure, in 2027 with the next great exhibition that she's going to plan. I think that the beautiful thing about copyright is like it had a strong run, and if you were a part of it, you were a part of it, and if you weren't, like, watch the movie. Like,
Yep.
good, you know. And but never say never. And I wonder, I am curious myself, and trust me, I will run if it is happening again. But I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. This was really fun. It was such a treat to have your film at the festival. It's just really great to see cool people doing cool shit. So thank you for being here and making the film.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And make sure that everybody goes and follows us on social media and keeps updated about the film as we go through the next stages of this.
Thanks.